friends, my name is Amelia. Welcome back to my channel. Now today, as you would have seen from the title and also from the little intro there, we are going to be talking about the 24 books that I want to read in 2024. Now obviously I want to read more than 24 books in 2024, but I'm just going to be talking about the 24 that I'm like specifically really wanting to read, like my priority TBR as it will. And so I have filled in my 2024 TBR spread here, but as you will have seen, I somehow accidentally put 2 copies of Grace of Kings on my file instead of 24 different books, so I have a blank spot here. I'll have to print out the cover for that at a later date. But let's go ahead and talk about these books. I won't spend too long on each one just because there are 24 and I don't want this video to be ridiculously long. But let's go ahead and jump into it with Memory of Light. Alright, so Memory of Light is of course the final book in the Wheel of Time series, which I've been working away on for like 2 years now, and as I said in my series for 2024 video, I would really like to finish the series this year, so making my way to Memory of Light is a priority for me. Technically I'm on book 11, but I chose not to put book 12 and just put the final book because I know I want to read this one. So I put book 12, not book 12, book 14, and wish me luck in making my way to the end of Wheel of Time. Alright, the second book on my list is The Navigator's Children by Tad Williams. This is the 4th and final book in the Last King of Ostend Ard series. Now you may have seen that I had it in my head that it was coming out this November, and I got really hyped for it, and then I realized that it said 2024. So I am alas still waiting for it, but I'm really excited. The Ostend Ard world is definitely, look, I won't say it's like my favorite fantasy world, but Williams' writing is just very, I don't know, it's very good. It's very my style. Like, I wouldn't say that the books are necessarily going to be for everybody, but if you like a long fantasy that's kind of slow with a lot of focus on characters as well as world building, then I definitely recommend Tad Williams' World of Ostend Ard. There is Last King of Ostend Ard, of course, but then there is also the original series, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. The third book on my list is The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th of the secret projects from 2023. I know I'm a bit behind because I haven't got to it yet, but I will, I promise, and I will talk about it on this channel. I mostly want to read it for completionist's sake, you know, to say I read all 4 of them, but it was also pretty well received, so I think I can look forward to a good read, but I don't really know what it's about, and I'm happy to keep it that way. Fourth, we have The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, of course. I was planning to do a full Lord of the Rings reread this year, but I only ended up having time for Fellowship before I got distracted by other things. So next year, one of the things I really want to do is complete that reread, and of course the next up is Two Towers. I don't think I need to tell you what this is about. We continue trying to throw the ring in a mountain of fire. Next is Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is book 3 in Between Earth and Sky, I believe the series name is, which I discovered this year. The first books are Black Sun and Fevered Star. And this is a slightly different fantasy world because it's actually inspired by indigenous cultures to North America specifically. And I really enjoyed the world that she created with all the different societies and politics and gods, of course. So if you haven't read Black Sun and Fevered Star yet, I really recommend it. This one I think is supposed to be coming out in July or so. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm probably gonna pre-order it. Number 6 is Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry. So this is the second book by this author in this kind of world. The first one is Legends and Lattes, which I actually haven't read yet, but I'm planning to read it this year, so I've put this one on my next year's TBR. These are kind of cozy fantasies about Viv and Orc, and I know in this one she starts a coffee shop. I'm not specifically sure what happens in this one, but I like to kind of go into my books pretty blind, as you will see on this list. A lot of the times I'm gonna be like, I don't know what this is about, but I want to read it. So yeah, Bookshops and Bone Dust. I feel like this will be a good winter read because, you know, you need something kind of cozy and warm-hearted to get you through January and February, at least where I live. Next is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 1 of the Stormlight Archive. I'm sure pretty much all of you watching this have heard of the series, or at least the author. And I started reading some of his work this year with the secret projects, and I was relatively impressed. You know, I enjoyed them, so I want to try to get more into some of his bigger series, which are extremely popular and well loved. So I'm going to start with the Stormlight Archive. It seems the most like it would be up my alley. But yeah, this is another one where I'm not super sure what it's about. I think it's high fantasy, and that's kind of all I need to know. 8th on my list is Rise of the Ranger by Philip C. Quatrell. I believe this is a self-published book, and this is book 1 of the Echoes saga. You will probably recognize most of these books from somewhere on YouTube. I haven't heard this one talked about a ton, but it was highly recommended, so I'm excited to read it, and I just love this cover. It's so beautiful. I just like the art style. It's kind of like, it's like realistic, but kind of minimalist, kind of, I don't know, something about it just really works for me. Next is one that you actually probably haven't seen anywhere on BookTube, at least I have not seen it, and it's called 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City. This was one that I just sort of saw in the bookstore at one point and was like reading the back. I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And it's essentially just like about a city under siege, and there are sequels about other things to do with the city, I believe, and it seems like it might be slightly humorous, you know, a little bit lighthearted, which I think would be a welcome relief from a lot of the heavier fantasies, so I'm hoping to pick that up at some point this year. Speaking of heavier books, the next one on my list is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I read Ninth House pretty recently, actually, I think last month or 2 months ago, and I really enjoyed it, but yeah, it is definitely very dark. It's kind of actually like dark academia, so you know, dark academia, it makes sense, but it's got secret societies, it's got magic, it's got good character work, so I'm excited to see what happens in the next one. I don't think it has been as well received as the first book, but I'm gonna read it and decide for myself. 11th on my list is Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is, I think also was originally self-published, but it might be traditionally published now. And from what I've heard, this is fantasy on a grand scale where he really goes in depth into the world building. I've heard a lot of people talk about it on YouTube. It's been extremely well received, so it's definitely one that I want to get to, but I don't want the North American editions. I want the UK editions, so I might have to wait until I can get around to ordering those from somewhere on the internet. I'm sure it's not too hard to find them, but I'm sure I'll have to pay a lot of shipping, but I think it's going to be worth it. All right, and then we have A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. You may have seen this sitting on my shelf behind me for a while now. I think I've had this for 4 or 5 months. I got it pretty soon after I read Prior to the Orange Tree, which I really enjoyed despite its pacing flaws. And I've definitely put this on a few TBRs this year and then just not got around to it. Like, it's just, look, it's not really much longer than a lot of the fantasy books I read. It's about 800 and something pages, but the pacing Priory was quite slow, so I assume this one's going to be quite slow as well. Which again, I read a lot of slow-paced books, but I just haven't been, I don't know, it just hasn't been like something that I have been dying to read recently, but I would really love to get to it next year, and I just think the cover is so beautiful. Continuing the theme of big fantasy books and in-depth series, the next I have Dead House Gates by Stephen Erickson, Malazan, Book of the Fallen, or Malazan, I don't know. I don't really know what the correct way is to say it, but this is probably one of the biggest in like scale, if not in length, and most in-depth fantasy series out there. The way people talk about it kind of intimidates me, but I really enjoyed the first book, so I will not let the intimidation get to me and stop me from continuing on the series. But yeah, these are quite thick. Now this is a mass market paperback, so it's not going to have as many words per page or have as much space per page as like a trade paperback, so it might actually be shorter in that sense, but this one is 950 pages, so that's a big commitment, and there are I think 10 books in this series. I was originally going to put the final book on this list, but I'm going to temper my expectations and just put the next one. Okay, I have to look at the title for this one because I don't have a physical copy of it. But it's called Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution by Kat Bohannon. Now, this is the only nonfiction on my list, and normally I listen to nonfiction, and I may listen to this one as well, but I also kind of feel the need that I might want to actually buy it and like write notes and stuff and like think more deeply about the contents, because I really am interested in, like, I've read 2 different books this year about like human evolution. I read Sapiens and then also Guns, Germs, Steel, which isn't specifically like human evolution, but like the evolution of humankind as we know it today in terms of culture and society. So I'm interested to see and look at that from the female perspective, you know? We get a lot of male voices in sciencey type things, so it's always interesting to hear what the women have to say and get their perspective. 15th on the list is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This one has been talked about a lot. Of course, it is another dark academia. It's about language and a magic that has to do with language, as well as colonialism, and it seems really interesting. A lot of people really love it, but people who don't love it seem to really not like it because of, I think it's just kind of slowly paced and that kind of thing. But yeah, again, this is one that I think I need to read it and decide for myself because it seems like it could be something that I really enjoy. Next up is Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, the author of The Night Circus, which I read this year and really enjoyed. And actually this one is another one where people seem to be quite divided. They either really love it or they don't get it at all. But recently I saw Katie is read this book and love it. And I decided, you know what, I should give it a try. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of Night Circus. And so I'm hoping for, if not, I'm not specifically looking for it to have the same atmosphere, but I would like to read another book that's very like atmosphere, even if it's in its own way, you know? So my desire to go into books not knowing what they're about really applies to this next one, which is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Everyone who I've heard talk about this has pretty much said that you really do need to go into it just like not knowing and experience it for what it is. It also seems to be kind of one of those ones that defies like explaining it. So I'm really excited to read this one. I think it's going to be different, at least from the rest of like the big fantasy books that I tend to read. And as I've said, it's nice to mix it up now and again. Next up is Isla's Reach. I don't really know which one is correct in this instance. And also, I have no idea what this book is about. I just wrote it down at some point because I heard people talk about it and the way they talked about it made it sound interesting and like something that I would want to read. But I have no recollection of what they actually said it was about. It was just on one of my lists, so I was like, yeah, that sounds good. So I don't know. It's fantasy. We'll discover together on this channel what it's about. Next, I wanted to dip my toe into some Terry Pratchett. I'm gonna try to start some Discworld books this year. It's not on my series list in my series video because it's not like something that I'm like really gonna like try to get through or anything. It's just like I might pick one up now and again. And I'm gonna start with Going Postal. I took like an online quiz about like which Discworld book you should start with, and this is what it gave me, so this is what I'm gonna do. Feel free to share your starting point recommendations in the comments, but I'm probably just gonna stick with this one. I'm excited to start Discworld. It's supposed to be kind of absurdist, and of course it is very highly loved, so I'm excited to get into it. 20th on my list is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. This is another one that I wrote down based on recommendations, and I have no idea what it's about. It's the beginning of a series. I know that. Other than that, I don't know. There's a sword on the cover. It looks cool. And we will yet again talk about it more on the channel when I get to it. Next is Senlin Ascends. I know a little bit about this book. I believe it's like a character going up a tower. I think there's a tower. I don't remember why he's trying to go there. But it sounded like an interesting concept. I have heard some people say that it doesn't really stack up, this book, but again, this is one of the ones where, you know, people's opinions are good, and this goes for my opinions as well, but you would never know if you're going to like something until you read it for yourself. So yet again, this is going to be one that I'm hopefully going to make up my mind on this year, and you will hopefully get to hear my opinion and then do what you want with that information, whether it's read it or not. Alright, next we have Jade War by Fonda Lee. So I read the first book in the series, I think 2 years ago now, and I have just kept meaning to get to Jade War, and I just have not. This is a highly loved series here on BookTube, and I really enjoyed the first one, and I just don't know why I have not continued the series yet, but it is a goal of mine to at least read Jade War next year, whether or not I finish the whole thing. I mean, it's only a trilogy, so come on, I should be able to do this. I don't know why I haven't. Then we have Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. Now, I'm not usually a big sci-fi girl. The ones that I have read haven't like been super sold on. But this is kind of like a slightly different style from those ones. It's, you know, space opera. It's a big thing. There's a whole TV show and everything. I've seen some of the show and I enjoyed it. I have no idea how closely it corresponds with the book, but I would like to, you know, have another attempt at sci-fi before I completely just like say like, it's not for me. And since this one is so popular, I feel like it might be a good place to start. All right, and then finally I'm putting Malice by John Gwynne on my 2024 TBR. I'm pretty sure it's on my current December TBR, but I don't think I'm going to get to it just because it's taking me a while to read Knife of Dreams. I have some library books that I need to read and return, so unfortunately I think this one is going to get bumped to 2024, but hopefully early in 2024. This is of course another fantasy. We're following 4 different characters trying to deal with violence and stuff. John Gwynne writes some pretty good action and stuff, and I think it's going to be similar in this. I've heard that it's complex, but like not crazy complex, you know, somewhere in the middle of the fantasy complexity spectrum. So I'm looking forward to getting around to this one. I really loved Bloodsworn so far. And yeah, that is Malice. All right, and that is all 24 books on my 24 books in 2024 list. Let me know what books you're planning to read in 2024 in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.